So the general approach that we take, and we'll then explain some of the steps as we go. The first step, of course, is to define the measurement conditions, the operating conditions of the product, and to acquire that data. So this can be automotive. We might be doing things like coast down or acceleration, or measuring whine noise for electric vehicles, and other noises that we might be interested in capturing from different products. Once we've captured that data, we do we manipulate that data a little bit in terms of getting it to the right file size and sound file length, and we create a jury test. We execute that jury test with typically 35 to 45 or more people. That gets us a good spread of answers in terms of judgments. And in parallel to that, we also need to identify acoustics and psychoacoustic analyses to characterize the parts of the sounds that we're asking people to judge. And this lets us, after that create the sound quality metrics. So we use the jury test results and the analyses that we picked as predictors to do regression modeling and come up with a metric equation. After that, we need to verify that our metric is indeed robust. So we do some iterations and some validation in that sense, going back and forth with the jury test results and the analyses that we chose, and make sure that the equation, the metric that we come up with, is going to be robust for future use. And then we like to be able to visualize this, or have a way for our customers to visualize the results of this work at the end, and that comes in part in the way of these sound quality pie charts. So there's an example here on the right hand side of the screen. Now the last two portions of this list are only available in a consulting project, but the rest of the work can be done in Artemis Suite through ASM 27. It's a metric project. And when we do these kinds of projects, there's a wide range of possibilities. It's very flexible. We can do all of these things for you. We can do just the metric development. We can do just the metric development in the jury test. So it varies in what customers are wanting for us to do. So I'd like to illustrate the metric development process using a small project that we did. In this case, I was testing some handheld drills, and we were evaluating the overall sound quality for a few different operating conditions. In this case, I was drilling holes into a 2x4, the skinny side, and then driving screws into those holes. And again, the idea behind the metric is that we create an equation that predicts what a juror would say about a specific sound in terms of sound quality or other sound aspects, and that lets us avoid having to do a jury test with, again, 35 or 40 plus people every time we either develop a new product, or we want to do some competitive benchmarking, or we need to do some target setting. Having this metric during the development phase of a product is key and crucial to streamlining the development and making sure that the products sound as we would expect jurors to judge them, and make sure that they meet targets. In terms of the test setup for this quick little drill project, we used the Head Acoustics Quadriga 3, new 8-channel system, and the BHM 3.3, it's a binaural headset. So I was the binaural head. I was wearing this while drilling holes. So you can see me here drilling holes into this 2x4, again on the short side. And for this project, we had 5 different drills, different combinations of power ratings, torque settings, corded and cordless drills as well. Once we've got our sounds in place, we'd create a jury test. And when we're creating jury tests, there are a number of questions that we need to answer or ask ourselves, and through which we'll answer from the jury test. When we're looking at our sounds or listening to our sounds, which sound attributes are we trying to evaluate? And this is a discussion that we have with customers as the project is being discussed. And we make sure that we incorporate that feedback into our jury test. Are there certain sound patterns that we need to address? Which types of tests in the jury test are going to be useful for evaluating these sounds? Is it a ranking test? We need to do a paired comparison test where we have an A to B comparison between each of the sounds. We have a lot of different tests that we can incorporate into our jury testing suite. Of course, also quite important are the participants that we have involved in the jury test. Who should we use? Should we use NVH experts? Should we use potential customers? People from different departments? And this kind of varies. Typically, when we have NVH experts, we can use fewer people because they're usually more in tune with the product and the sounds the products are making. But it's also important to have outside feedback as well, people that may not necessarily be as familiar with types of sounds, but they're familiar with, for instance, vacuums or hand drills. And then we also need to consider where we're going to actually perform these jury tests. Are we going to do them in a listening studio like we see here on the left-hand side? Is that going to be sufficient, or do we need to involve more contextual immersion? So for instance, with the hand drills, do we need to create a mock workshop where we can have people come in and sit or stand around and listen to the sounds? They get that feeling of, okay, I'm listening to the drill sounds, I'm in a workshop where drills will be used, this makes sense. So these are also other things that we need to consider. So to create and administer our jury test, we use our new jury testing suite called Scala. It's been out for about a year now, maybe a little bit longer, but it's a module within Artemis Suite that can be licensed, and that's where we again create and administer our jury tests. The workflow is, at least to me, very intuitive for those that are using Artemis Suite already. We have the same left to right workflow that we see in other projects like the Pool project, for instance. So we would bring in our sounds, create the attributes list, questions that we're going to ask, and then build the jury test. Again, all left to right. And then we can administer it right from Suite itself. We have a lot of different test types in Scala, including, for instance, one that we used for the drill evaluations, a category judgment. So here we were asking about overall sound quality for the drill sound. So each of the sounds that we created and measured, we have listed here in this view, and then people just listen to the sound and evaluate for overall sound quality. Another test that we used was Semantic Differential, and here we're able to ask specific questions about the sounds themselves. So for instance, we asked about power. How powerful does the drill sound? How loud does it seem to be? Are there any tonal aspects? And so on. Furthermore, for those of you that are handy with MATLAB or Python or other programming languages, you're able to code your own jury tests if you've got something in mind that's not available in Suite using our Scala ASX modules. This is an interface that kind of links the two things together. In terms of administering the jury test, we have got several different options available. The most basic would be the standalone version, where you would create the jury test on your computer, have a listening station, and people can come up to that listening station and laptop and go through the jury test. This would be, of course, a one at a time deal, but it's effective. The second option we would have here would be the listening studio, and there are a few options within this option as well, where we can create the jury test and then send it out to different clients. So for instance, in my consulting inventory for my jury test system, I have 7 or 8 tablets and playback systems with dedicated headphones where people can individually take the test at their own pace. On the other hand, we can also have everyone listen to the test at the same time, so each sound is played once or twice, and everyone evaluates that sound at the same time. And then lastly, we have this distributed option. We use this more for kind of testing out how our jury test feels, if the flow is correct, if we're asking the right types of questions for the sounds that we want to have people evaluate. We might send this to our colleagues or to the customer and say, how do you kind of feel about this? The concern here, of course, is if there's no calibrated playback at the end, then we're getting skewed results a little bit. But it's a good way to get an idea of, hey, is the jury test kind of flowing and going in the direction that we want it to?